On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Eriksson Ek is definitely a top 20 center in the NHL. I don't care what NHL Network says.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we'll take a look at the NHL Network's list of top 20 centers right now and vehemently disagree with Eriksson Ek's omission from said list. We'll provide documentation and go player by player and see just how many on this list Eriksson Ek is better than. My name is Seth Toupal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. I've been the host of Locked on Wild since 2021, and I'm a credentialed member of the Minnesota Wild media landscape. I am going to just put a disclaimer in here right off the top. I've been letting this marinate for a little bit since this list came out, but in doing a couple of other shows leading up to the start of the NHL season as a guest, finally hit my breaking point to where we can't go any further without discussing this, and I need to put this out into the ether, how just beyond wrong this is. And so what we're going to do here is we are going to take a look at the NHL Network's list of the top 20 centers in the NHL. And I'm going to be honest, I don't have an issue with a ton of these names because obviously Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Austin Matthews, Leon Draisaitl, Alexander Barkov, that's those are some pretty good names. You know, then 6 through 10, Sidney Crosby, Brayden Point, Jack Eichel, Jack Hughes, and Elias Pettersson. Those are all some pretty good names. But what in the name of all that is sacred is this? JT Miller at 11, Sebastian Aho at 12, Connor Bedard at 13, Rupe Hintz at 14, Dylan Larkin at 15, Nick Suzuki at 16, Tim Stützle at 17, Robert Thomas at 18, Mika Zibanejad at 19, and Nico Hischier at 20. This is a list. This is a choice that that was made here by the people at NHL Network, and frankly, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of Eriksson Ek continuing to be slept on as a player in the National Hockey League, because let's just start with a couple of statistics I can pull right from the top. Eriksson Ek this past season was the 7th best in the entirety of the NHL. Entirety of the NHL with 39.3 expected goals. Now, did he come in under that mark? Sure. But he was expected to score 39 goals this past season, and the only centers on the list that are better than him in that mark, Sidney Crosby, John Tavares, Sam Reinhart, and Austin Matthews. And guess what? John Tavares was expected to score 41.7 goals this season. He scored 29. Sidney Crosby was expected to score 40.5. He scored 42. Sam Reinhart, 44.3. He scored 57. And Austin Matthews, 50.8. He scored 69. So, Eriksson Ek, as a center, had the 7th highest expected goals in the entirety of the NHL. I'll raise you one. I'll do you one better. Faceoff wins. Now, I know overall numbers for Eriksson Ek from a faceoff perspective are not going to be as high as some of the other names on this list. But Joel Eriksson Ek had the 10th most faceoff wins in the entirety of the NHL with 796. He placed 10th in the Selke Trophy voting. His faceoff percentage at 49.7. You look at the guys that took regular, I'm talking not like a specialist type. John Tavares was highest at 59.3. Vincent Trocheck at 58.7. Sidney Crosby was, another name on this list who took over 1,800 faceoffs this season and had a 58.2 win percentage in the faceoff circle. But some of the other key names on this list from a top 10 center perspective, Leon Draisaitl. His faceoff winning percentage was 56.9. That's pretty good. JT Miller, 56.3. John Tavares was at 59.3. And John Tavares, in fact, didn't even make this list. I don't believe. No, he did not. But some of the other players on the list, Nico Hischier, 56.6. Again, pretty darn good. Austin Matthews was at 53.4. Nick Suzuki at 52.6. But, I just vehemently disagree with how this list has been put together because Joel Eriksson Ek has always been a good defensive center. That has been his calling card since he came into the league. And we have slowly seen him build into a two-way threat with finally getting to the 30-goal plateau this season and continuing to, like clockwork at the age of 27, continuing to exponentially raise his performance and to up his statistics every single season he has been in the league. He is widely considered to be one of the biggest pains in the rear end to play against out on the ice because of how intense he gets and how good of a job he does on the defensive side of the ice. And now that he finally has the offense to match it, we're just going to throw some of these other names on this list and say, oh yeah, definitely better right now. Doesn't sit well with me. And so, you know what we're going to do to finish things off here over the next few segments of this episode? We're going to go case by case. And we're going to see how Joel Eriksson Ek stacks up to this list of 20. I'll give you a hint. The first 10 is probably not as big of an issue as 11 through 20. But by the end of the episode today, I'm going to give you a firm reason as to why Joel Eriksson Ek is a top 20 center in the NHL. Because this list is trash. So we'll take a look. We will take a look at where Joel Eriksson Ek stacks up in the top 20 centers right now list as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. We're getting towards the end of summer. Labor Day will be here before you know it. Fall baseball is unbeatable. Target Field, open roof, some of those crisp fall nights. You're not going to find a better way to spend your evening than by getting tickets and going to see the Minnesota Twins play. With Game Time Picks, they filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, take advantage of Game Time's 50% off Labor Day offer for Diamondbacks and Dodgers, for example. All you have to do is head to the Game Time app and find the tickets you're looking for. Curated deals to make it easier to find the best price on great seats. Seat views before you buy your tickets. It all makes Game Time the place to go. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Plus, all-in pricing. You can toggle this feature to show the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder to check out the Locked On NHL podcast for the full lowdown on everything going on throughout the NHL. We've got a wide array of panelists throughout the week, including at-large coverage Monday and Friday, Eastern Conference Tuesday, Western Conference Wednesday, and Power Rankings on Thursday. Locked On NHL is your team every day. So let's get to this list. We told you the top 20 centers according to the NHL Network. Let's see just where Eriksson Ek slots in this list. Now, obviously, Connor McDavid at number 1. I don't have an issue with that because as much as Eriksson Ek can play with him, McDavid's the better player. Same thing for Nathan McKinnon. Those guys bring just such a level of offense to the table that it's hard for a player like Eriksson Ek to match, even as he has brought the offense along over the course of his career. Austin Matthews, Leon Draisaitl, Alexander Barkov, probably the same thing for those three. Alexander Barkov was your Selke Trophy winner, brings a ton on the defensive side, and so him at 5 on this list is a little bit of an eye scratcher. But you get into some of these other names on this list, and look, Sidney Crosby is royalty. Sidney Crosby is going to go down as one of the best players to ever do it in the NHL. And even at the age of 36, still at a 90-point season, 42 goals, 52 assists, 58% in the faceoff circle, and was a top 10 for the Hart and the Selke trophies this past season for voting. So I probably would still take Sidney Crosby at this point. Again, I don't have a ton of issue with the top 10 and where they slotted in. But, Brayden Point. Let's talk about Brayden Point because Brayden Point's a good example of a player who has had some really, really good seasons and has put up some, frankly, incredible numbers over the course of his career. But now you're starting to get into that range of players that maybe we start to have conversations about where he slots in compared to a player like Eriksson Ek. Just pulling up Brayden Point's stats for this past season. And, Point is also 27. He had 46 goals, 44 assists, 90 total points. You look at the face-off numbers. He didn't take a ton this past season. He played in all 81 games. He only had about 600 face-offs on the season. And so Eriksson Ek has a little bit of the edge there. But, points-wise, Point still has the edge. On the power play, he's a insane contributor with 32 power play points this past season. And, he was 4th in the Lady Byng Award rankings this past year. Brayden Point, I would probably still give the edge, but let's talk about Jack Eichel. Eichel is a really good one here because Eichel, he has battled injuries over the course of his career, which Eriksson Ek has as well, but had 31 goals this past season, 37 assists. Jack Eichel has never been known as a defensive force at really any point of his career. He's a premier offensive talent, so he definitely gets the edge there. But I think Joel Eriksson Ek gives you the better defensive play between the two. And so still probably going Eichel, Jack Hughes, another name on this list of the New Jersey Devils, and one of the younger players on this list, at least until we get to page 2, which is where I'm really going to light this thing on fire. But Jack Hughes is a capable, more than capable scorer. As I pull up his statistics here as well. Just 22 years old. He had 27 goals, 47 assists, 74 total points. And again, this is mostly offense that he brings to the table. He does a very good job of it. 2022, 2023, he had 99 points. So a little bit of a step back this season, but still very capable, ton of shots, and played a career high in minutes this past season. But he's not a huge, I don't consider him a true center because he took just over 300 faceoffs. If you're talking about like a tried and true definite center, that is somebody that is taking as many faceoffs as your team needs. And Jack Hughes has been just not his best numbers in terms of winning faceoffs, 37.2%. And he's not being looked at to win those key faceoffs in critical moments, which is, I think, it's not the only, but it's one of the hallmarks of a top center. Is somebody that can win you one late in the game to get your offense set up so you can go score the game-tying goal. McDavid, McKinnon, Barkov, Crosby, those guys are all doing that. Joel Eriksson Ek is doing that. I don't know about Jack Hughes. Jack Eichel would. Jack Eichel is the unquestioned top center for the Vegas Golden Knights. What is Jack Hughes doing at 9 on this list? Elias Pettersson is an interesting one as well because I don't question the offensive talent at all because he is somebody that is very capable of putting together 100-point seasons. He is pretty much a pencil it in for 35 goals and somewhere in the 60 to 70 assists range. He had 34 goals and 55 assists this past season. And you look at his numbers as well, 50%, 50.8 in the faceoff circle. Does a bunch in the on the power play. He had 31 power play points this past season. He's pretty much an automatic 35 goal and 70 to 100 point guy. It is a little bit of a wide range, but he is, he's one of the top players on that Vancouver team. So honestly, let's get Jack Hughes out of the top 10. Let's put Elias Pettersson at least one spot higher. Number 11 on this list is JT Miller. And JT Miller had a pretty darn good year. He has become a pretty prolific scorer at age 30. He had 103 points, 37 goals, 66 assists. He's just a juggernaut in the faceoff circle. 14, almost 1,500 faceoffs himself. And so he is somebody that's taken those top, 100% those top faceoffs that you would equate to a top center. Your top center is going to be on the ice in key situations. He is definitely going to be right there. You got Sebastian Aho at 12. And for Sebastian Aho at the age of 26, 54% of the faceoff circle, 36 goals, 89 total points. He's had 36 or more goals the last 3 seasons, 500 plus faceoff wins each of those years, above 50%. Good characteristics for a top center. And so, Aho may be one that moves a little higher on this list. Now, one of the other things to consider is if you have 4 really good centers, you may not need to have your top guy take those in key spots. Well, let's talk about 13. What is Connor Bedard doing on this list? Yes, I know he had a great rookie season. He's heralded as the next big thing, but he has a lot of work to do. He's a very good player right now, but he has a lot of work to do to continue to elevate his game. Like he doesn't give you anything defensively right now. He didn't get a ton of work on special teams. And yes, he was taking all the number one opportunities on the top line for Chicago, but he just is not, I would not have him on this list at all. And so that's probably a spot where Eriksson Ek can take that roster spot, or Jack Hughes. Maybe you move Jack Hughes into the 15 to 20 range if you really want to, but again, doesn't really meet those qualifications that I look for in a top center. Is he a good offensive playmaker? Absolutely. But if you're a top center, there's more that you bring to the table than simply scoring goals. Connor Bedard at 13. Rupe Hintz is one at 14 that I have less issue with because I feel like Rupe Hintz is not given enough credit for being as good as he is right now for that Dallas team. And so Rupe Hintz versus Eriksson Ek is an interesting case because Hintz, I think, has gotten off to a better start in his career, but I still maybe lean towards Eriksson Ek again because of the defensive value. Like Eriksson Ek over Bedard is not even a question. Like I would take Eriksson Ek right now over Connor Bedard easy. I'd probably take Eriksson Ek over Rupe Hintz, but it's close. Like they're pretty similar in what they bring to the table. I think Eriksson Ek is better offense or defensively, but I think Eriksson Ek is also capable of putting up Rupe Hintz type numbers if he has line mates like Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy for the whole season. So probably lean Eriksson Ek, but again, it's close there. We'll talk about the final 5 on this list because I'm starting to think that Eriksson Ek makes his way into the top 15 without really even a sweat here. So we'll continue to break down the top 20 centers right now, according to NHL Network, and why Eriksson Ek needs to be on that list as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are your team every day. Reminder to make sure that you take part in the Locked On Wild sweepstakes. All you have to do is take a screenshot of proof that you have subscribed on YouTube with your name to lockedonwild@gmail.com. We'll take entries until the start of October. And then we will draw for a winner to receive 2 tickets to see the Minnesota Wild take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. That'll be at home on Thursday, October 10th. You'll be there, and you'll have the chance to say hello to me as well. So we'll keep taking entries until the start of October, and we'll draw a winner. Full contest details can be found in the description of today's episode. So if you're curious as to some of the particulars, you can find that in the description here today as well. Okay, so we're in the 15 to 20 range for this list. NHL Network's top 20 centers right now. Dylan Larkin of the Detroit Red Wings is the next player listed here. And let's take a look at what Larkin brings to the table this past season. There he is. Larkin had 33 goals, 36 assists, 69 total points in 68 games. Ton of faceoffs. Check that box. And again, this feels like a situation where you maybe give Larkin the edge in the offensive department because he's been a 30-goal scorer the last 3 seasons. He's done it 4 times throughout his career. Joel Eriksson Ek has just entered that territory, and that's not to say that he can't continue to do it, but Larkin has the bigger pedigree of doing that consistently. But I would still say on the defensive side that I give Eriksson Ek the edge. So between the two, probably a toss-up. I'll probably still go Joel Eriksson Ek there. And if you want to equate that to bias, you are certainly welcome to do so. 16 on the list is Nick Suzuki. And Nick Suzuki had a fantastic season this past year offensively, but you're going to hear the same thing from me that you did over the course of these last few players. Suzuki had 33 goals, 44 assists, 77 total points in 82 games played. No question, bunch of faceoffs. He had almost 1,300, 52% in the faceoff circle. But it's not even a debate here that Joel Eriksson Ek gives you more defensively, even though Suzuki was a top 15 finalist for the Selke Trophy. He was 13th this past season. And so, again, I would maybe move Suzuki a little higher on this list, probably a spot or 2. Very close to where Joel Eriksson Ek slots in as well. Tim Stützle at 17 was another player on this list, and a young up-and-coming center for the Ottawa Senators. Stützle this past season, he finished with 18 goals, 52 assists, and 70 points in 75 games played. Took about 500 faceoffs. Still is just 22 years old. And last year he had 39 goals, 90 total points. He hits a ton. And I think here I would probably give, not just due to recency bias, I'd probably give Ek the edge, both offensively and defensively. Stützle's coming into his own, but this last year was a step back. It was a step back for him after a strong 22-23 season at the age of 21. So I'd probably give Eriksson Ek the edge over Tim Stützle in both offense and defense. Next on the list at 18 is Robert Thomas of the St. Louis Blues. And Thomas has turned himself into a really nice offensive player for the St. Louis Blues for sure. If I recall correctly, as I'm pulling up the stats, he had 27 goals this last year, 26 goals and 60 assists for 86 points in 82 games. He's had 20 goals twice in the last 3 years. Just an insane amount of faceoffs, almost 1,600. With 53% in the faceoff circle. He was 25th in the Selke Trophy voting. So he does bring you a little bit defensively. And so I'll probably give the slight edge offensively to Robert Thomas, but definitely going Ek on the defensive side. And Thomas is not he's not somebody, he doesn't get physical. Like number one centers, like centers themselves, the good ones aren't afraid to throw their body around a little bit. 16 hits for Thomas in 82 games. He's not trying to shoulder somebody off the puck if the situation calls for it. So I probably give Ek the edge there as well. Mika Zibanejad is next. Zibanejad had 26 goals, 46 assists, 72 total points this past season, 49.3% in the faceoff circle, 30th in Selke Trophy voting. And for Zibanejad, 20-plus goals, 7 straight seasons, including 41 in 1920 and 39 in 22-23. So he's a prolific offensive playmaker, prolific scorer. This one feels like kind of a toss-up as well. Again, defensively, I probably got to give Eriksson Ek the edge again. But offensively, if you want to go with Zibanejad, and my guy Johnny Lazarus probably laughing right now, I feel like Ek matches up. I feel like he stacks up there with Zibanejad too. And then the final name on the list is Nico Hischier of the New Jersey Devils. Boy, you got a lot of Devils on this list. Hischier checks in to this list. Now, he is the captain for the New Jersey Devils. He had 27 goals, 40 assists, 67 total points in 71 games. Ton of faceoffs, almost 1,400 of them, 56.6%. Top 20 in Selke voting. So he does bring you a little bit defensively as well. 20-plus goals, 3 straight seasons. 80 points in 22-23, but a step back this past season. Down to 67 points. And again, I feel like Eriksson Ek may not bring you as much offense, but now you can't even say that because now Eriksson Ek has entered the 30-goal threshold. And so you can't even say he doesn't bring as much offense. He's a dynamic net front guy. And he is a key contributor on the power play, the penalty kill, the offense, the defense, overtime, you name it. Joel Eriksson Ek does it for this Minnesota Wild team, and he continues to get better, which is why the overall crux of the show today is that it is infuriating to me that even though Joel Eriksson Ek continues to improve, you get lists like this, and you throw Connor Bedard on the board because he had one season in which he scored goals. That's all he brought to the table. And I'm sorry, Joel Eriksson Ek just is better than Connor Bedard right now. Will Connor Bedard gain ground and eventually overtake? Yes, because that's what he's supposed to do. And while the top of this list, I don't really have as much issue with, 11 through 20, you can look at most of those players on that list, and Joel Eriksson Ek stacks up with them, and then some. So it's time to stop. It's time to stop sleeping on Joel Eriksson Ek. He's the number one center for this Minnesota Wild team, not because he has to be, but because he earned it. And it's time for his name to go in the conversation amongst the great centers in this game. Does he have room to improve? Yes, and he will. Is he a bona fide, diamond in the rough, top Connor McDavid type player? No, he's not. But guess what? He's good enough to be able to play with those guys defensively and slow them down. So I rest my case. But that'll do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild part of your listening plans throughout the week. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes. You can follow us on your favorite audio platforms as well. We will continue to keep you up to date throughout the rest of the offseason into training camp for the Minnesota Wild with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.